Imagine seeing Earth from the moon. The quiet blue majesty of everything you have ever known compressed into a single marble, suspended in an ocean of inky black. The feeling of awe would be overwhelming. So would the scale. And so would something else. A quiet, unsettling dread. A perspective so extreme it almost defies language. The men who went there felt all of that. But what we rarely hear about is what they felt when they came home. This is that story, and it probably isn't the one you're expecting. Many of us dreamed of going to space when we were young, but of the billions of children who have ever grown up, only around 700 of them ever fulfilled that dream. No doubt it was as wondrous as they imagined, and then some. But for some, especially the Apollo astronauts, it also carried a cost. A heavy one. Because when you're surrounded by the inky blackness of space, when you can blot out the entire Earth with your thumb, it gives you a certain perspective, a unique one. And that perspective can carry a psychological weight the human mind quite literally did not evolve to bear. Astronauts train hard. They prepare for the mission and for the countless ways things could go wrong in the blink of an eye. An engineering failure, a medical emergency, even being struck by a piece of the growing ring of space debris that now orbits Earth. But in the early days especially, there was almost no preparation for the mind to cope with what humans were never meant to do. Launching a rocket filled with biological creatures into space is, quite literally, an act of defiance against evolution. Our minds evolved to cope with the savannas of Africa, the plains of Europe, the sands of Asia. And yes, through grit and perseverance, we eventually learned how to colonize almost the entire planet. But we did it slowly, gradually, on our own terms. And it was still Earth. It was still home, the place we evolved to inhabit over millions of years. But space is different. We are not supposed to be there. It is barren, desolate, utterly hostile to our biology. That was both terrifying and awe-inspiring to the early pioneers. And of course, the best people were selected for the job. They weren't sending emotionally fragile midwits into orbit. The toll on the psyche was expected and prepared for. But there was an unexpected curveball, and it didn't happen in the blackness of space. It happened back here, on the blue-green marble we call home, after they had returned. A phenomenon that came to be known as the overview effect. Earth seems vast to us, in many ways endless, and relative to our scale, it is. No human ever has or ever could see every square inch of it. We experience it one place at a time, and because of our need to put down roots, often the same place for most of our lives. We have hometowns, regions, nations, borders, foreign lands, distant cultures. That sense of structure is normal, it's grounding, it's human, and it is taken from you in the 9 minutes it takes a rocket to reach orbit. From space, there are no towns or cities, no borders, no individuals, just a single globe containing everything and everyone you have ever known. And that perspective can take something away, a sense of continuity, a sense of normality, and, most devastating of all, a sense of home. This psychological shift became known as the overview effect. There are countless astronauts who have tried to describe it, and it happens even in low Earth orbit. Instead of explaining it myself, I'll let them speak in their own words. Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweikart said, "When you go around the Earth in an hour and a half, you begin to recognize that your identity is with that whole thing. And that makes a change. You look down there and you can't imagine how many borders and boundaries you crossed again and again and again. And you don't even see them. There you are, hundreds of people in the Middle East killing each other over some imaginary line that you're not even aware of, that you can't see." Edgar Mitchell, who, if he hadn't been an astronaut, could easily have been a poet, said, "You develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, 'Look at that, you son of a bitch.'" There are countless quotes like these, different in tone, character, and voice, but united by a single idea. This is our planet. It is small, it is fragile, and we are getting things very wrong. If orbiting Earth can have such a profound effect on the human psyche, imagine what standing on the moon must have been like. Imagine training for months, the mission consuming every waking thought, surviving launch, surviving the 3-day journey through space, then finally stepping onto an alien world. Yes, it is our moon, but to the human mind, it is unapologetically alien, barren, monochrome, and utterly unforgiving. Early explorers lost at sea still had air to breathe, water to drink, and the faint hope that land, or rescue, might appear. The Apollo astronauts had no such comfort. Everything could kill them. A failed pressure suit, a faulty ignition, a simple miscalculation. And perhaps worst of all, they could survive a disaster with absolutely no hope of rescue. That terror was expected. What they didn't expect was something far more human. These were among the best humanity had to offer. They were prepared to die for the mission, not hypothetically, but realistically. They endured exhaustion, isolation, and total separation from everything that feels alive. No green, no blue, no birdsong. And yet, when they returned, it wasn't the terror they spoke about, it was perspective. Neil Armstrong once said, "It suddenly struck me that tiny pea, pretty and blue, was the Earth. I put up my thumb and shut one eye, and my thumb blotted out the planet Earth. I didn't feel like a giant. I felt very, very small." And the legendary Buzz Aldrin described our natural satellite with these famous words: "It was also desolate, more desolate than any place on Earth. There was no atmosphere, no plant life, no signs of life anywhere. The starkly barren, monochromatic hues all around me." There was simply no preparation for this, nor could there have been, since no such conditions exist on Earth, or could even be convincingly simulated. They had to confront that stark, alien hostility within their own minds, and they did it incredibly well. Of course, they were celebrated as heroes when they returned. Crowds cheered them. Prime ministers and princesses wanted to meet them. They were immortalized in memory, and they always will be. You might think that this would make anyone whole, complete, secure in the knowledge that they had achieved something no one else ever had, and few ever would, at least in their lifetime. But for many, the reality of returning to Earth was not everything it had promised to be. Many of the lunar astronauts experienced psychological challenges to varying degrees, and I encourage you to explore that further if it interests you. But here, we're going to focus on just one of them, Buzz Aldrin. Because Buzz was unusually open and honest about what it feels like to experience the impossible, and then return to a life that, had the Apollo missions been classified, would appear entirely ordinary to everyone else. It began not long after landing back on terra firma. Buzz was, of course, an incredibly ambitious man. You have to be to land on the moon. But here's the problem. If you reach your peak at 39, with literally no possible way of surpassing it or even matching it, ambition can turn into a curse.
The millionaire can aspire to become a billionaire. The television actress can aspire to become a Hollywood star. But for Buzz, exceeding his achievement could exist only in his imagination. And that was hard to live with. As he later said, "I had gone to the moon. What do you do next? What do you do for an encore?" There was no goal, no sense of calling, no project worth pouring myself into. I was suffering from what I call the melancholy of all things done. Worse still was the way people treated him. He had gone from one of the most meaningful careers a human being could ever have to, in his own words, a celebrity, a PR man for NASA. I was a hero, but inside I was a man whose life had lost its direction. Things were no easier in his personal life. Most sons covet their father's approval above many material things. And yet, Buzz's father made little effort to hide his disappointment that his son had been the second, not the first man to set foot on the moon. His father was no underachiever. He had been an Air Force pilot and held a doctorate in aeronautical engineering from MIT. But compared to Buzz's achievement, his own accomplishments were, by any honest measure, ordinary. On the surface, Buzz had everything: fame, money, and enormous respect. But he had lost one of the most important things a human being can have: purpose. In 1971, Buzz left NASA and the Air Force. He was 41 years old, and for the first time in his life, he had no commanding officer, no mission, no checklist. He was struggling with clinical depression and heavy drinking. He was adrift in an ocean of loss. Not the kind of loss you or I might recognize: a job, a relationship, a possession. No, what Buzz had lost was far worse, because it was unrecoverable. He had lost who he was, and no amount of money, ambition, love, or training could give that back to him. He became a car salesman, not because he needed the income, but because idleness to him was a fate worse than death. He wasn't a great salesman, and worse still, customers didn't come in to buy cars. They came to get an autograph from the man who walked on the moon. He would spend hours talking about the vacuum of space, only for them to leave without buying a thing. It is a cruel irony that, to him at least, his life began to resemble space itself: dark, empty, and seemingly void of hope. Yet a spark of Buzz flickered in that darkness from time to time. He quit drinking in the 1970s. He spent decades obsessing over Mars, because for him, it was the only thing that could ever exceed his past achievements. He designed what became known as the Aldrin Cycler, a complex orbital path capable of ferrying humans to Mars efficiently. He wasn't just a pilot anymore, he was a mathematician again. In 2002, at the age of 72, when confronted by a conspiracy theorist who accused him of faking the moon landings, Buzz didn't argue. He didn't explain the engineering or the mathematics that made it possible. Instead, he punched the man square in the jaw. A flicker of the fighter pilot remained. On his birthday in 2023, he married his longtime love, Dr. Anka Fowler. He tweeted that they were as excited as eloping teenagers.
and later that same year, he was finally promoted to the honorary rank of Brigadier General in the United States Air Force, an honor his father would likely have approved of, though it came more than 50 years too late. It speaks to the complexity of the human spirit. Buzz Aldrin reached extraordinary heights, literally. He descended into melancholy, drink, and depression. And yet, in the end, he managed to carve out at least a fragment of himself again. The Apollo missions were not just journeys through space, they were journeys through the human condition. And that journey taught us something worth remembering. Whether things are going badly, or even when they are going well, there is one thing we should always try to retain: perspective.